Single dad denied a room in his own hotel, staff fired on the spot. The rain poured from the afternoon sky like a curtain of silver as a tired, mud-covered man stepped through the grand glass doors of one of the most luxurious hotels in the city. His clothes were soaked. His boots were worn. His face carried the exhaustion of someone who had fought 100 battles without anyone noticing. Clutched tightly in his hand was a bouquet of white lilies. What happened in the next few minutes would cost several employees their jobs, shock every guest in the lobby, and reveal a truth nobody could have imagined. Before we begin, if you believe kindness matters more than appearances and that everyone deserves a second chance, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs inspiration today, and subscribe to Heartbeat Tales for more emotional stories that touch the heart. The man's name was Harrison Cole. To everyone who glanced at him that afternoon, he looked like a struggling laborer who had wandered into the wrong place. His jacket was stained with dirt. His hands were rough and weathered. The large duffel bag hanging from his shoulder looked as though it had survived years of hard work. No one could see the extraordinary story hidden behind those tired eyes. Harrison approached the front desk slowly. The bouquet in his hand was beginning to wilt from the rain. He had spent the entire morning traveling from a neighboring town after visiting the grave of his late wife, Clara. Every year on the anniversary of her passing, he brought her favorite flowers and spent a few quiet hours remembering the woman who had changed his life forever. The trip always left him emotionally drained, but he never missed it. As he stood before the reception desk, two employees exchanged uneasy glances. They looked him up and down before one of them forced a polite but cold smile. The hotel was crowded that afternoon. Wealthy guests moved through the marble lobby carrying designer luggage. Business executives checked emails while waiting for elevators. Nobody paid much attention to the tired man standing at the counter. The receptionist barely looked at the reservation system before informing Harrison that there were no rooms available. Harrison remained calm. He explained that he already had a permanent suite reserved under his name. The employee's expression hardened immediately. She assumed he was making excuses. Several guests nearby began watching. Harrison reached into his pocket and handed over his identification. The receptionist glanced at it briefly and returned it without checking carefully. Her assumptions had already been made. To her, the man standing before her couldn't possibly afford a luxury suite. She insisted he leave before security became involved. The words hit Harrison harder than anyone realized. Not because he was angry. Because they reminded him of years he had spent being judged. Years earlier, Harrison had been a struggling construction worker living paycheck to paycheck with his wife and young daughter. He knew exactly what it felt like to be ignored, underestimated, and dismissed. Back then, life had been simple but happy. Everything changed when Clara became seriously ill. Medical bills piled up faster than they could manage. Harrison worked double shifts, sold personal belongings, and exhausted every savings account they had. Yet despite his efforts, Clara passed away, leaving him alone to raise their 6-year-old daughter, Madison. The loss nearly destroyed him. For months he moved through life like a shadow. Every morning felt heavier than the last. Every night felt impossibly lonely. But then something happened. During a construction project downtown, Harrison noticed an abandoned historic building scheduled for demolition. Most people saw a crumbling structure. Harrison saw potential. Using borrowed money, countless sleepless nights, and every ounce of determination he possessed, he purchased the property and transformed it into a small boutique hotel. The project nearly failed multiple times. Investors walked away. Contractors quit. Banks rejected him. Yet Harrison refused to surrender. 5 years later, that small boutique hotel became one of the most successful luxury destinations in the state. Then another. And another. Eventually, Harrison built a hospitality company worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Yet despite his success, he never forgot where he came from. He continued visiting construction sites personally. He often dressed casually and worked alongside employees. He believed respect had nothing to do with expensive suits. Unfortunately, not everyone shared that belief. Back in the lobby, the receptionist had already called security. 2 guards approached Harrison. Guests began whispering. Some pulled out their phones. Others simply watched the embarrassing scene unfold. Harrison remained calm. He held the bouquet carefully, protecting it from being crushed. One of the guards politely asked him to leave. The situation was becoming uncomfortable for everyone. Just then, the hotel's general manager emerged from a nearby office after hearing the commotion. At first, he appeared annoyed. Then he looked closely at Harrison. His face instantly turned pale. The manager froze. His eyes widened. For a moment he couldn't speak. The lobby fell silent as he rushed forward. What happened next left everyone speechless. The manager immediately apologized and addressed Harrison with a level of respect that stunned everyone present. Confused guests watched as the receptionist's confidence disappeared. The security guard stepped back. The manager explained to the shocked employees that the man standing before them wasn't a guest. He was the owner. The silence that followed felt endless. The receptionist's face turned white. Several employees looked as though they couldn't breathe. The realization spread across the lobby like wildfire. The muddy jacket. The worn boots. The tired appearance. None of it mattered. The man they had judged within seconds owned the entire hotel. Yet what happened next surprised everyone even more. Harrison didn't yell. He didn't insult anyone. He didn't boast about his success. Instead, he quietly asked a simple question. He wanted to know how often this happened. The question struck harder than any angry speech ever could. The manager hesitated. Because deep down, he already knew the answer. Far too often. Over time, certain employees had developed a habit of judging guests based on appearance. Complaints had surfaced before, but they had never been fully addressed. Now the consequences stood directly before them. Harrison looked around the lobby. He saw wealthy travelers. Families with children. Elderly couples. Business professionals. Then he imagined how many ordinary people may have been humiliated in that very space. How many exhausted travelers had been treated unfairly. How many hard-working individuals had been made to feel unwelcome. The thought broke his heart. Because he remembered being one of them. Years ago, after Clara's diagnosis, he had entered expensive places wearing work clothes, desperately seeking meetings with investors and lenders. Many had dismissed him before hearing a single word. He knew exactly how painful those moments felt. That memory stayed with him forever. After reviewing security footage and speaking with witnesses, Harrison made a difficult decision. Several employees responsible for repeated discriminatory behavior were terminated immediately. The decision wasn't made out of revenge. It was made to protect the values upon which the company had been built. Every employee understood the message. Respect wasn't optional. Kindness wasn't optional. Human dignity wasn't optional. For the first time in years, the hotel's culture began to change. Training programs were expanded. New standards were introduced. Every guest would receive equal treatment regardless of clothing, age, race, occupation, or financial status. The story could have ended there. But fate had one final surprise waiting. A few weeks later, Harrison received a letter. It came from a young single mother named Ava Bennett. She explained that months earlier she had entered the hotel seeking shelter during a severe storm while traveling with her son. She couldn't afford a luxury room and only wanted a safe place to wait until conditions improved. Instead, she had been treated coldly and asked to leave. The experience had devastated her. Yet after hearing about Harrison's actions, she wanted to thank him. Not because he fired employees. Because he stood up for people who often felt invisible. Harrison read the letter several times. By the end, tears filled his eyes. He immediately contacted Ava and invited her and her son for a complimentary weekend stay. During their visit, Harrison spent time speaking with them personally. He learned about their struggles, their dreams, their challenges. And for the first time in years, Ava felt truly seen. Stories like hers began arriving regularly. Letters, emails, phone calls. People shared experiences about being judged unfairly throughout their lives. Many thanked Harrison for reminding the world that appearances reveal very little about someone's character. Months later, the hotel became known for something more valuable than luxury. Compassion. Guests frequently described feeling welcomed from the moment they entered. Employees became proud of the culture they helped create. And Harrison found a sense of purpose he hadn't felt since Clara was alive. One afternoon, nearly a year after the incident, Harrison stood in the lobby once again holding a bouquet of white lilies. The same flowers he carried on the day everything changed. This time, however, something felt different. A young bellhop approached an elderly traveler struggling with heavy bags. Without being asked, he offered assistance. Nearby, a receptionist warmly greeted a tired family covered in road dust. Nobody judged them. Nobody looked down on them. Everyone was treated with kindness. Harrison smiled quietly. Because this was the hotel he had always dreamed of building. Not merely a place where people slept. A place where people mattered. Before we reach the ending, if this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, comment, share this video, and subscribe to Heartbeat Tales. Your support helps these meaningful stories reach more people around the world. Special request: comment below with the words, "Kindness sees beyond appearance," if you believe every person deserves respect regardless of how they look. As the sun shone through the lobby windows that afternoon, Harrison placed the white lilies beside a framed photograph of Clara displayed in his private office. He looked at her smiling face and felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Peace. The pain of losing her would never disappear completely. But the lessons she taught him continued living through every life he touched. The greatest success wasn't the hotels. It wasn't the money. It wasn't the business empire. The greatest success was creating a place where nobody would ever be made to feel small because of their appearance. And somewhere beyond the noise of the world, Harrison believed Clara would have been proud. Because kindness had won. And sometimes, that victory changes everything.